All right. What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Headed Home Podcast. We're your hosts, Andrew and Jen Gallegos. We're hanging out here with Leslie Hazan. Thanks for joining us today, Leslie.
Of course.
Looking forward to a good episode today.
I'm really excited.
It's nice outside.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a Monday.
Yep.
A little case of the Mondays going on.
You do?
Well, I did put my coffee in the microwave for a minute instead of 30 seconds this morning. And I've been scorched all morning.
That's why. And Leslie, do you drink coffee?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
she drinks hot coffee cold.
No, but our argument is I just don't care. Like, as long as it's coffee, I'll drink it. So if it's cold or if it's been sitting there for 3 hours, I'll just drink it. And he absolutely will not. So
are you okay?
I'm a one extreme or the other. It needs to either be hot or cold.
Yes.
Okay.
So either smoking hot or like ice in it, ice cold.
Yes.
You guys are on the same team.
I have a very specific setup the way I make my coffee. I'll put it, I brew it early, and then when I blend it with a couple MCT oil, and we do that.
Yeah,
collagen.
you have a whole thing.
I've got a whole thing, but then I always put 30 seconds on the microwave, right? So then it's warm enough for me to kind of handle it throughout the morning. But then today, for some reason, I did a whole minute.
So I've been hearing about this problem for the last hour of my life.
I've got hot coffee and hot tea going right now. But no, yes. Other than that, excited to be doing another episode with Leslie here. Leslie, I know you are a very successful real estate agent. And one of the questions that I always like to ask our guests, just because getting into real estate and lending, it's not the traditional path where you go to school and you go to college and you graduate and you get into the real estate business. So what was your entry into the business? What was your path?
Oh, gosh. Well, when I was 25, I bought my first house and renovated it, sold it a couple years later, and then I was kind of hooked from there. So that was how I started. From there, I renovated several homes along the way. I got into doing real estate development projects for myself, some investment properties, things like that. And then a few years down the road, got my license and started doing retail transactions as well as the projects that I was doing. Also held my general contractor's license for many years. And so I've just, in general, always had a love for the whole process of buying, selling, renovating, building, all of those different aspects of real estate.
Sounds like you got in a fun way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not just like starting to do like the residential transactions, but actually getting in there, doing renovations, like seeing almost like the equity building aspect of it too.
Absolutely.
It's pretty cool.
And I think it's one of the things my clients really appreciate is that I have that background. Because it helps them maybe see things in homes that they can't see themselves. It helps them understand, hey, if I'm buying something that might need some renovations, what is that going to look like for me? Yeah. And so, I think that experience helps me bring a lot to the table for my clients too when we're going out there and looking and buying homes.
Yeah.
What market are you? I mean, I know you're in the metro area, but what markets do you specifically work in? And maybe tell us about, how much production or how many families that you help each year.
Okay. I mean, a lot of my past clients and work is kind of spread out all over metro. I tend to focus primarily along the I-25 corridor and west up into the Foothills. Some of the niches.
West is best. Okay.
Some of the niches or things that I gravitate towards tend to be the luxury properties and premier neighborhoods, Porsche properties, as well as land. I have a lot of experience with land sales and things like that as well. I think consistently, I've been producing between 10 and 15 million in sales a year the last few years. And that translates to about 15 families during the year on average.
Yeah.
That's great. I know that, to work at the level that you're working at takes a lot of a lot of personal development skills and things to be really good at your job. What sort of qualities do you feel like make you great?
Oh, let's see. I would say a lot of the feedback that I get from my clients, the things that they really like about working with me, is that I communicate at a really high level with everybody. I take a lot of time to get to know my clients. I always approach it as it's an honor for me to work with people and help them with what is inevitably a huge transaction and often accompanied by huge changes in their lives, right? Yeah. Things that drive people to want to buy and sell homes are usually big changes in their personal life as well. And so I take the time and I'm very patient with getting to know my clients, what they want, what they like, what they need, and why. And we spend time really getting to know them, getting to know properties. And I think that combined with the knowledge that I just bring in general about the real estate industry, I'm very passionate about always studying and being on top of what's happening in the market, emerging technologies, all kinds of things on the back end that just help me in general tune into my clients and really understand what they want and need and help facilitate them through the transaction. I also build relationships with my clients that last well beyond, the initial transaction that we do together. We stay in contact. Many of my clients become really good friends over time. And then I really have the privilege of helping them again and again as they go through different changes and have different needs.
That's awesome. It's funny, you can, get coaching or take classes or watch videos on how to be successful in business. But I feel like there's just this fundamental trait of successful people in business. And it's like listening, like sitting down with the person that you're trying to help and understanding exactly what their goals are. And then you can kind of put yourself in a position to help them achieve those, or find out what their problems are and put yourself in a position to be the solution maker. So I think that's awesome. And it's a really just basic piece of advice too for our listeners, just listen to the people, listen to your clients. What do they need? Especially if it's a big purchase like real estate where it's a few $100,000 or more, make sure that you're taking the time to understand and listen to exactly where they're coming from so that you can be that solution maker for them. I love that.
We got to, I would say, experience a really cool thing with you. And I kept talking to Andrew after we met because I feel like there's people that you meet in your life that you just feel like really connected with. And you are one of those people for me. And I think one of the things that you were just talking about was like understanding human connection and understanding that like people experience life outside of a real estate transaction. And I think that you like very deeply understand that there's like a whole life outside of work. And we were able to meet and kind of talk about some things that you have experienced in your life over the last few years. And one of the most important things that I think we can do in life is learn from people's experiences and listen and take lessons from the things that people have learned from what they've gone through. And I certainly did that with you. And I would love for you to share some of your experiences or things that you have experienced over the last few years. If you're up for it.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm happy to share. So I think that I guess I'll just quickly kind of give you the backstory.
Yeah.
So I'm currently a single mom with 3 teenagers, and we're going to go back in time a little bit and I'll give you the backstory on how that happened.
Yeah.
So about 8 years ago, I met the man of my dreams. We got married. This was second marriage for both of us. I had a daughter and son, and he had a daughter, so we blended our families. And then we got married in 2014. And he was a home builder, and I was in real estate. I'm a general contractor. So we built a business together, built our own dream home up on Lookout Mountain. It was fantastic. Kind of process going through all of that together. And then in 2017, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so it was, stage 2B breast cancer. I had to have full mastectomy, reconstructive surgery. I had to go through chemo. And so it was quite a challenge for our family. We had 3 young kids at that time. And they were there and saw us go through all of it. And there was a lot that I learned going through that process. And then in 2019, at the end of 2019, I had my final reconstructive surgery. We kind of had the worst of everything behind us. And we were driving home from my surgery, and the left side of my husband's body went numb. And we got loaded into an ambulance, taken to the hospital, and 24 hours later, we found out he had a mass in his brain. And from there, more doctors involved. We found out the mass started changing really rapidly, and his symptoms started changing really rapidly. And we had to go through the process of getting him down to MD Anderson in Houston, because it was clear that he needed surgery or whatever was going on in his brain to find out more about what it was, because we can only tell so much from imaging. And he, in May of 2020, we were down in Houston, he had surgery, and we found out that he had grade 4 glioblastoma, which is a primary brain tumor, brain cancer, and it's terminal. Your average lifespan with this diagnosis is about 14 months. And so we had to really reevaluate everything at that point and make some big changes, which we did. And we were lucky enough to have him with us for 3.5 years. It's not an easy 3.5 years, but he passed about a year ago now. And so we, as a family, have gone through a lot of changes, a lot of transitions. In addition to all of this, we had pandemic and teenagers and everything else. And so it's been quite a ride the last few years.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing all of that with us and our listeners. And I've thought a lot since we met about your story. And I think like every layer that you've talked about is like a whole book of lessons in general of that could completely change or transform who you are as a human. And I think the fact that you kind of went through these things like, oh, like I had this diagnosis. And then by the way, my husband has this diagnosis. And by the way, he is going to die. And by the way, like we have 3 children going through a pandemic. I mean, that's all of those things have been impactful on their own for you, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And I think on many levels has probably caused you to reevaluate many things in your life and what you value. And I know one of the things that we talked about when we met was around like your dream home that you had created with your husband. And I would love to know just, your thought process around, you were living in this great house and you'd always wanted to build it. And then all of these things happened for you. What changed?
Well, everything. Mm-hmm. We felt like, oh, we're living the dream. We had gotten through my cancer treatment at the time when we finished the house and moved in. And so we thought, oh, great, that's behind us. now we can move forward. And when he got his diagnosis, we started really looking at life in general. And we had to make some really hard choices because we knew really quickly that I was going to be taking care of him and our kids and our home and our businesses and everything else that we chose to keep on the plate, that it was really going to fall on me.
Yeah.
And so we did some really hard evaluation and choices. We sold the dream house. It was up in the foothills in the mountains. It was beautiful. A lot of maintenance. Snow removal in the winter. There's a lot of things that go along with owning a home in the foothills. That when you're doing that by yourself, along with everything else, adds a lot of complexity. I mean, it added, drive time to everything that we did. And we were now down to one driver because he couldn't drive. So to get to medical appointments and schools and things like that, that was one of the first choices that we made. And it was, at the end of the day, an easy choice. I mean, it was really clear once you sat down and thought about it. It's like, it's just a house. Yeah. And I mean, really your home and where your heart is with the people in the house, not the house. And so we sold the house and we bought a different house. We also were able, fortunately, to, buy the new house for cash so that I didn't have the pressure of a mortgage payment every month that I had to meet. So we started making changes like that and decisions like that to simplify our life and to prioritize what was important, which was our family time and our time with him. And we shut down one of the businesses, and we shut down his home building business. So we went from having 2 successful businesses with 2 incomes to only my income. And at that point, that's when I went actually for the first time, full time into real estate and real estate sales only. Because, one of the great things about real estate is the flexibility that it offers to work around life and things that are going on. And so again, it made a lot of sense to make those changes. And so that's what we did. We did what we needed to do.
I remember, obviously a very different circumstance that we went through. But I remember when I was really sick, we left a house that we had, built. And the thing that I remember so clearly about the experience that we had, which sounds like what you had, was like your values are so clear in those moments where it's like, this matters absolutely zero to me. Like my health matters, my family matters. And anything, I also don't think that people necessarily understand, and thankfully, right? Like I'm so grateful most people don't understand this, but the amount of time being sick takes away from like just everyday things, right? And so when you're making those decisions, you have to be really thoughtful and intentional about how can I get time back, because you all of a sudden like don't have any time.
You kind of have to become a well-oiled machine, and also at the same time very able to adapt on the fly. Mm-hmm. Because one of my favorite mottos over the last few years became, we make plans and the universe laughs. Because, we try to do our best to, know how are we going to fit all of this in, the doctor's appointments, the school, the work, all of these things that we have to keep going. And inevitably something comes up. You get a sick kid, my husband required 24/7 care. I couldn't leave him alone. And so if I didn't have coverage, or if the person who was supposed to be providing coverage called in sick that day, you're constantly pivoting and adapting and reprioritizing. And you just learn that, you can't be too set in what your plan was for the day. There's, you can prioritize things and you will get them done. But sometimes you have to kick the can down the road, or sometimes you have to drop your shower for the day, or whatever it is that you need to do to get through the day.
Yeah. I think you guys in that sense had a similar experience when, I was kind of just laying in bed all the time, but I'm kind of asking you about
you explained it perfectly. I think that you have a decision to make, and I think I know where you're going with this, right? Like, how were we able to adapt and become more efficient and find more time? I think you have a decision to make. You either give up or you decide, okay, I'm going to try my best. And when you try your best and you are looking for those opportunities to let go what is not as important, and those opportunities to learn, I think was really helpful for me.
I think one of the things that I had to learn along the way too is how to take care of myself when I was going through all of that. So that I had
what did you do?
So that I had the strength.
Talk about
so that I had, I think I don't think anybody really knows how strong they are until they have to do something hard, right?
Yeah.
And I think I've talked to so many people over the years that unfortunately have had to go through hard things, but you kind of, you have to always look for the silver lining and be grateful for the things that you do have. But one of the things that I realized was like to be able to get through all of this, that my self-care was extremely important, and not just physically, but even more importantly, mentally.
Yeah.
My mental well-being and my mental health. I had to go through a lot. So when I went through cancer treatment, one of the things that happened is I had my ovaries removed, and that sends you into menopause. So from like feeling energetic and healthy and having everything working to like instantly surgical menopause, it does all kinds of things with your body and your hormones and your brain. And I had severe mood disorder, depression after that for many months. And one of the things that I had to do was take responsibility for how I was feeling, for how I was taking care of myself, and really learn how to get myself up and out of that place so that I could function every day. Because it was really easy to just, turn into a sobbing puddle in your closet and just want to give up. But you can't. You can't do that. And so you learn how to care for yourself mentally. And I had along the way over the years, everything from, medical intervention with antidepressants for a short time, until I could get into the place where I could establish a regular physical exercise routine. And once I was able to do that again, then everything, that really helps with the chemicals and the hormones and everything, and keeping that piece positive. A lot of it was also therapy, as well as I do a lot of reading. I'm a voracious reader. Almost every night when I climb into bed, I'm reading something. And so over the last few years, it's been everything from like professional development books to mental health books to books on grieving, because we were all going through this anticipatory grieving. I was grieving, when you go through cancer treatment or any kind of medical treatment, you grieve the loss in your own body and the changes that you've gone through. And so I really prioritized that to make sure that every day I could show up, even though the day was hard. Like, I wanted to just know that it might not be pretty, but I'm here and I'm going to get through this day, and I'm going to get my husband through this day and my kids through this day and my clients through this day and whatever we need to do.
You mentioned, and this was like a very familiar feeling to me, but I think what's hard about being sick, or what's hard about having, systems set up in quote unquote normal life, to take care of yourself, is when you're sick, you all of a sudden can't work out. Like my biggest tool was that, for mental and physical health. And you all of a sudden are thrown into this world where you have to figure out how you can have some sort of positive tools in your toolbox that are very limited. And that in and of itself can be incredibly difficult, because you don't have, the things that you've always relied on are not there anymore. And I remember, there's a loss with that, where you can't hike, you can't maybe even walk. Like, it's just, you're like, well, what do I do now? And that can be really difficult to kind of sort through as you're not feeling well.
It absolutely contributes to that. Which is, I think, when I was able to finally get to the point through my own recovery, I was able to get back to that point where you just start small, right? Like, I started with literally, walk one block. Mm-hmm. And then the next day, I'm going to walk a block and a quarter or whatever you can do. But you build that slowly, because that for me also was always one of my go-to things my whole life. I've been very active. And when you can't do that, it really affects you in profound ways that you have to figure out how to adjust. Mm-hmm.
How did you, I think this was a topic that we were talking about. Our kids were young, and I know, you were probably kind of considering this too, but I know you're always modeling something for your kids, right? And so one thing, like, we were really thoughtful about going through, our health experience is what are we setting up for our kids to see? And so, what did you do, or what did you think about when you were sick, or when you were, helping your husband when he was sick? Like, what were the things that were really at the forefront of your mind with your kids?
Yeah. Early on when I got my diagnosis and knew that I was going to be going through all the treatment, I was very intentional in understanding that, hey, this is a scenario where, it would be really easy for me to feel sorry for myself and be a victim and be negative. And I'm not going to do that, because one of the things that I always want my kids to understand is life can be hard. It can throw us curveballs. It can do all of these things, but it doesn't mean that life is bad, or that we have to be, that we have to let it tear us down or be negative. Like, how, even when hard things are going on, or, I'm feeling debilitated and sick, how can we still find joy, and how can we still be grateful for the things that we do have? Even at one point when I went through my first round of chemo, I went neutropenic, which is where, like, you lose all of your white blood cells and you have zero immune system. And like, my kids coming home from school with a cold, it can kill you.
Yeah,
it can kill you, right? And so, I had to quarantine, like, in my room with my door closed until my blood counts got back up and my immune system recovered. And so my kids couldn't come in, and I couldn't hug them, and I couldn't do these things. And so what are we going to do with that? Like, so we started, I'm like, hey, we're going to pass notes under the door. Like, so my kids and I had this whole, like, prolific round of, like, notes and, like, pictures and all kinds of stuff going under the door. And so we tried to make it fun, and we tried to keep that connection, even though the way that we were able to connect changed, but how do you, I tell my kids this all the time, we can't control what happens to us in life a lot of times, but we can, control or own how we respond to it and what we do with it. And so that's been huge.
I feel like that's such an important mindset to have. And it's, like, resilient and optimistic, and obviously helped you through these past few years that you just went through. Have you always had that? Like, where did that come from?
I think that to some extent it was there.
Yeah.
I was really competitive when I was younger. So I think I always had something in me that was like, I'm not going to give up.
Fire.
Like, yeah. Now the kind of the more like, I think the nuance, the more positive, like always looking, like learning to come from a place of gratitude and really understanding that even when things are really hard, we have so much that we can look to be thankful for. And, you know, I think that is something that really kind of came more along with the later years of life and everything that we've been through the last few years has really made that sink in, how important that is. And yeah, I mean, I think that's ultimately just, you know, because just fighting and just being strong, and that wasn't enough the last few years. It wasn't. So, you know, I had to have more. I had to understand, like, on this day when it's really hard, what can I turn to help me get through, to help me, you know, be awake for an extra hour so I can get a read to bed or whatever I needed to do. Like, what was it that would help me dig deep and, you know, find strength when I just felt completely spent. And it always came back to that. It always came back to, wait a minute, let's take a step back and understand, like, what are the blessings right now, right here today? Like,
and is that, did you have like a gratitude practice that you would do throughout that? And was it like a part of your routine?
Yeah. So one of the things that I really developed as I was going through all of this is I have a morning routine that I do. I get up usually at 5. I mean, my rule of thumb is I need to be up at least an hour before anyone else, right? So if you don't have the hour,
you need that hour.
So I get up at that hour before, and I have my morning routine, which is first thing I do is I get on my elliptical, or I do something to just like get the heart rate up, get me going for the day, and then shake off the night. I roll from that into a little yoga routine that I do just for some stretching and relaxation and waking up. And then from that, I transition into a short meditation. And then I finish with I actually journal or write out gratitude and affirmation for the day. So it's, you know, it's a combination of physically and kind of mentally getting myself ready for the day, taking care of myself first, putting on my oxygen mask before, you know, everybody else's. And that routine has served me really well over the last few years.
If you miss that, if you miss that routine, do you notice what kind of impact?
Absolutely, I notice. I just like, if I miss the routine, my whole day just is kind of off kilter a little bit, you know, and I just feel like, okay, tomorrow I need to get back to that, right? You know, so, I mean, again, life happens, right? And sometimes you miss the day. And so I figure if I get it most days and every once in a while it's not happening, you know, in general, I've got my baseline. A lot of times what I'll do if I miss the morning, I tend to not miss the whole thing. Like sometimes I have to shorten it or whatever, but I try to at least get the pieces in so that the habit is still there, even if the time that I like to spend on it isn't. And then, like, worst case scenario, if it just doesn't get done in the morning, I still try to get pieces of it done throughout the day, right? And if that happens, I usually do it in reverse. Usually what I look for first is the time to do the gratitudes and the affirmation and then the meditation, you know, and then some exercise if I can get that in or whatever.
Yeah, I love that you've got it in the routine, so it's systemized. Because
I feel like that's saved us like so many times.
Well, and you're better about that, like getting in it. If I miss my routine, I have such a hard time going back and even doing.
I'll put it in when I can.
You do it,
but I get better at that. But it is. I mean, for me, it just defines my whole day, and I think, you know. And I would say our morning routines kind of started around the time that we got sick. Like we were
Yeah.
very like methodical about those. But I think the thing that I feel that is so important about a morning routine is it gives me a sense of power and control over my day, because when you have experienced a lot of things in your day that you have no power over, like I know the first hour and a half of my day is like, I can control that. Right. And so, if my whole day goes to shit, which sometimes it does, right? Like you have those things that you can really like anchor to. And that has been really, just really valuable for me.
Yeah, I kind of feel like when I finish it in the morning, I, often feel like, okay, bring it on, day.
Yeah,
I'm ready. Like,
Yeah.
bring it on. Whatever it
Mhm.
is that today's going to bring, I'm ready now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a reset too.
Yeah.
I feel like it kind of cleanses you from yesterday too.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think, and there was one, I started doing this year, but I can't remember who. It was one podcast that I was listening to, but before you get out of bed, saying thank you like 5 times, like that has been really helpful. Cause sometimes you'll wake up, and we wake up really early. You're just like, oh God, like I don't want to get up. I never want to get up. Right. But just like saying thank you
Or
puts
was it
you in
the
a
footsteps?
Oh
Was
yeah,
that-
where you walk,
Yeah,
but I don't
thank
do the
you.
foot. Yeah, but just saying thank you in
Yeah.
the morning, like, is so different to reframe your day than being like, man, I have to do all this stuff,
Yeah, and I think too, one of the things that you learn when you're seeing somebody go through a terminal illness is like, my husband fought for every day that he could be alive, right? And I think if all of us could just understand how important that is, to be grateful for every day that we're alive, that we get to wake up, because we don't know, like none of us knows, right?
Mhm.
What's our time here, right? We can't change what's behind us. We have no idea what's coming. And so we need to be grateful for today, every day. And I mean, it's my mission every day. And I ask my kids every day when I drop them off for school, when we're in the car on the way to school, I'm like, what are you guys going to do today to live your best life today? Right? Because that's what we have to do.
Would you say that has been the biggest lesson that you have taken away? I know there's so many.
Oh gosh.
There's so many.
I think that's a huge one. I think the other thing for me personally that I've learned over the last few years is, how important it is to come together and, be able to, like, I didn't hide we didn't hide anything from our kids. We, always looking for that opportunity to learn, to grow, to, hey, if this isn't working out the way that I want it to, maybe it's not supposed to, like, and so, gosh, there's so many lessons, but yeah, I think that's my biggest takeaway. And I think a big part of that is, that's like my husband, that's how he always lived his life. He, at the end, he's like, I don't have any regrets for myself personally, because I lived an amazing life. I lived every day. He said, my only regret is that I'm not going to be with you and the kids. That's hard. But, that was his wish for all of us. Is like, life is messy and it's crazy and it's full of beautiful things and amazing things and it's full of hard things, and just, go out there and live it to the best of your ability every day. And I think if we all can do that, I think what an amazing place in the world would be. Like if we were all out there every day trying to live our best life and lift people up and look for the things that we're grateful for.
I mean, I think it's so interesting, because when you are in a place where you understand that life isn't guaranteed, you do look at life very differently. And I'll catch myself sometimes, like I forget that there were things that I couldn't do, that I would have given my, anything to be able to do again, like drive my daughter to dance so when I find myself complaining about that in my head, I'm like, Jen, remember, this is something that you would have given anything to do. And I think that when you have a very clear understanding that you have one life, that's it. You have one. Who said that? There's no dress rehearsal.
Right.
You have one, and so you got to live it and be really thoughtful about how you want to. That can really change how you look at things.
Absolutely. And I think I feel like I'm a lot more intentional in the last year. Yeah. Because, I do look at things differently now. I have an opportunity every day to make choices and to be intentional in how I'm going to live my life, how I'm going to interact with my kids, how I'm going to interact with my clients, what am I going to do with my business, what am I, and I think it's really empowering, and it's really a gift to have that perspective and be able to say, hey, I'm going to be really intentional about how I spend my time today. And what I spend it on.
Yeah, no, I just think it really does change the way that you think about your time. I mean, big and small things. And for me, I feel provides a compass of what sort of activities or even people,
Right.
There's you just have this understanding that you have a limited amount of time. And so I think sometimes, and I can remember, when I was younger, I didn't get that. And I do have a sense of gratitude for that understanding of saying I understand that this is what I have, and I'm going to do the very best that I have with what I've got.
I think perspective is key there, and I think, like you said, it changes the way that you interact with the world, and from and the gratitude part too. I love that you said that it does kind of take you out of that victim mentality that any of us could fall into for a variety of different reasons, but you had so many excuses to fall into that and you didn't. I think is just a testament to that character that you had, and that you had built over time, in those practices too.
And sometimes it had to be a conscious thought every day, right?
Yeah.
I think more
some
often.
Days I think
most days it is.
Some days it's easy to, could it be easier to maybe fall into feeling sorry for myself and not want to get out of bed and fear and lack and oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? And to take a step back and be no, I'm not gonna, that's not where I want to spend my mindset and my time.
Yeah.
I look around me. I have so much to be grateful for. I have, I'm definitely an abundance mindset kind of person. And how do we stay in that space?
Yeah.
But it gets tested.
For sure.
And sometimes they say that about marriage too. Some days it's a choice, right? You have to make that choice every day, over and over again. Yeah. And it's the same with your mindset. It's the same with it. You make that choice every time, every day, multiple times a day.
Yeah.
And and that's really, that's what we have in our life is that choice, that freedom to choose. What kind of space am I going to create for myself today?
Yeah.
It's like that Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Did you ever read that? Oh, it's good. It's when he's in the concentration camp. And he talks, I read it before one of my surgeries, but he talks a lot about how there's all of these awful things he's experiencing. And the only thing that he can control is how, his mindset and how he's responding to them. And then that when you figure that out, it can be incredibly powerful and how it changes your world, because there's just, so many things that you just don't have control over. But that is the one thing that no one can take away from you. And when you recognize that provides a level of control and power over whatever you're experiencing.
But recognizing that can be tough. And I think that's where that morning routine, I mean, we talk about it probably on every podcast that we've done, but like, it is just so important because you do forget. And even if you get shown that perspective, you forget it, because you do start, you start to feel better. And then you just, we start to take things for granted again. And just having that,
I think all
the time, I'll be like, I'm good on gratitude. I don't need to do it for a while. And then you start to realize, like, why am I in such a bad mood right now? And it's like, because I'm forgetting. Yeah.
Oh, I think last week I came home, I was like in a tear. I don't know what happened. It was probably like week 30 of a child's sickness and, throwing a wrench in our week. But I remember you were making dinner and you're like, what are you grateful for? Like, it was like, and I was like, oh my God, like I had spent the entire day thinking about all of these things that were like not great,
Right. And you're hyper aware of it,
totally.
And it's just, I think we all have to just make sure that we have some sort of time set aside, some sort of practice in place, and just a piece of something reminding you to be grateful, because if not, your life's just not going to be as good.
And I love my kids have been learning this lesson too, because some days when I come home at the end of the day and I'm like a little on edge maybe or whatever.
Spicy.
They'll ask me, they'll be like, Mom, how was your day? What's been going on? What are you grateful for? They'll ask me like this. I'm like,
yes, that's it. There you go.
That's what I'm grateful for right there. At the end of the day.
Doesn't it just like make you, because we do that with our kids, like we talk about gratitude at the end of the day with them, or like what are things that went well, or like what did we mess up on and what did we learn? And it's when you hear them do it on their own, you're just like, oh my God. Like,
Or you see them do like a habit that you've been trying to build in them.
It's just the best
It's a proud moment.
What I'm interested in, you read a lot, so I'm interested in what are a few books that have really, from like a personal development standpoint, or your grieving process, what have so there's a few.
I actually did, but I actually did a grieving program, which was 6 weeks, and it was a book that you read, and it was a really transformative kind of grief program, and I can't remember the name of it, but
we'll put it in the details of the podcast. We'll get it.
But that was a big one because it steps you through your relationship with the person or thing that you're grieving. And it's a really interesting process. It's not, at all associated with what a lot of people think is the definition of grieving. But that was a really great process because it essentially, I did it with my husband and anticipatory grieving, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways, that's a huge gift, right? To be able to go through this process while they're still alive versus, something sudden and unexpected. It's hard in a lot of ways. And we both are hard, right? Yeah. But it basically stepped you through the process of evaluating your relationship with, in this case, the person, and taking an inventory of kind of your relationship and the good things about it and the bad things about it, because nothing's perfect, right? And what do you want to say to that person? And then you write a letter to the person. And because he was alive, I got to actually sit down and read it to him. And like it helped you with closure, basically, the whole thing of, how do you, have a really nice feeling and closure about that relationship. I did it after that with myself, like the grieving of the loss of the things physically in my body from going through cancer treatment. And it was just, it was a principle that applied to a lot of things. And so that has helped a lot. As far as like some of my business things, Atomic Habits was a big one that I read a few years ago. That was really big, And so that really helped cement for me, like, how important that morning routine is, and how do I hack my life a little bit to make sure that I'm getting those things done that are important. And just, some of their tricks for like piggybacking something that you want to add onto something you're already doing.
The habit
those
stacks.
are invaluable, so that one kind of really stuck with me.
By the way, I feel like you'll totally understand this. I get this probably makes me a complete dork. When I like find a way to like stack my habits, like for example, if I'm like doing, driving or like learning something new, or when I like can stack a few together and like at the same time and get them all done, it gives me a level of joy that I think is like, it's embarrassing for sure. But it's like when you start thinking that way, you really try to find ways to like chunk them, or get them done in a succinct fashion so you can really,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And anyways, I just feel like you would understand.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think funny enough, the Jen Sincero series, like the Badass series, those I read those probably at a really good time that just like kind of supported, because when you're going through all this, you're kind of like, oh gosh, okay. How am I going to get through this? Well, I'm going to have to figure out how to be a badass. And that series definitely helped on, the personal side, and helped with some of those kind of fear issues around lack. And am I going to be able to make enough money to support my family and do all those things, and so that was another kind of timely one. Professionally, the Ninja program just kind of, again, brought into, because I already was a very much a relationship-based broker, and just person in life in general. And that whole program just kind of reinforced, just personally and professionally, because they also start off, when you do their initial installation, the first 2 days are really around you and your mindset, and how do you show up, and how do you show up with the right attitude, and how do you show up with gratitude, and all of those things that are super important. And then the second, part of it is, how do you nurture your relationships, and really and that's kind of how I always was. So it kind of just reinforced, like in sports, how you always go back to your fundamentals. There's a lot of that in there.
That's awesome.
I mean, work seems like, I want to ask you a couple business questions, but So, it seems obviously not as important as everything else that we're talking about, but from a business standpoint, you also had a really good year last year in terms of production.
Yeah, I've been pretty consistent as I've gone through all of it. My production didn't fall off. It kind of stayed.
Which is crazy.
I think that I just wanted to mention that.
That's like, we could talk about just that for an entire hour, I feel like.
But
and I just think, I really think that the mindset piece, the taking care of myself piece, just, that ability, that's carried me through personally and professionally through the last few years. I think one of the things that I've learned is what an amazing kind of village community I have around me. Family, friends, my neighborhood, and people who live there that set up a meal train for us, and my client base. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of my clients become friends. And so they all, everybody knew what was going on in my life. I'm an open book, and so during those years, there were some, clients who didn't want to work with me because of what I was going through. Like, it's really hard to win a listing when you're completely bald, and, but, I still went on the appointments. I still showed up. I still did what I needed to do. And I found that just the support that I've had over the last few years across the board has been amazing.
And I think there is it's important to like point out, I feel like, to people, when you are going through something like you went through, the importance of community and like getting help from people is really, really important.
It is. And it was hard for me at first to ask for help because that wasn't
Because you're high functioning.
Yeah, and super competitive and super independent, and and so it was hard at first to lean into that and accept help and support. But then once you learn how to do that, you realize that's not weakness, that's actually strength, and being able to be vulnerable and being able to ask for help. And people are so willing to help lift you up and help support you. And, at the end of the day, that was also a really big piece of what helped me get through the last few years, personally and professionally, and come out the other side, in a place of strength, in a place of confidence, in a place that was, I think like love has been a huge part of all of this too. My love for my family, and I guess myself, it starts with your love for yourself, right? And then your love for your family and your friends and your community, and it grows. And so that's been a huge part of what's helped carry all of us through.
Well, I just want to say to you that I feel like I could just ask you 8 million questions for the rest of my life, but I just want you to know that you are an amazing human being, and I feel like I have a lot to learn from you still, but I have learned a lot, and I just am so appreciative that you have shared what you've been able to share with us.
Thank you. I'm so glad the two of you came into my life as well. And it's mutual, right? I've learned from you guys as well in our conversations.
Yeah, we have strange parallels, but it's definitely, I think, given us just a lot of gifts. And so I know as difficult as it is for you to talk about or to have just obviously gone through, I want you to know that that there's positive pieces that I'm sure as you share your story that people will be able to take from that. And I just want to thank you for the pieces that you've given me. So
thank you.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
LeslieHazan.com, my website. That's probably the easiest and straightforward. And then everything else is on there. My social media accounts, my phone number, anything that you need. Also milehighmodern.com. That's the brokerage website as well. Those two places are the best resources.
Right.
Awesome. Well, thank everyone so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time on the Head at Home podcast.
Thanks, everyone.
1 hour, like on the dot.
Oh,
I think I
you
started
did so
recording.
good.